Hey, Bulls and Bears. Well, hot off the presses, we have the delinquency rate for U.S. credit cards, and it's not looking good. First of all, please make sure you like and subscribe this video to get us some traction here. Let's go ahead and not waste any time. Let's get in right to the info here and into the data. This comes out of FRED. That's the Federal Reserve Economic Data site here. We have the delinquency rate on credit cards just out here a couple days ago, giving us the end of the third quarter numbers. This is as of the end of September. So this is July, August, September. And we have just surpassed the 2020 delinquency rate of 2.66. We're now at just under 3% delinquency rate on U.S. credit cards here in the U.S. So consumers are not looking like they're doing very well, but we're being told that consumers are strong, and that the economy is strong, the consumer is resilient. Is what they keep saying over and over. But yet now, if you look back, we're at the highest we've been for this delinquencies on credit cards. We have to go all the way back to the first quarter of 2012. So we're over a 10-year high. But I bet if you look around on the business news channels, you probably will not hear that. If you do hear it, it's going to be a very small segment at the end of the show or something like that. But this is definitely being kept undercover, I think, for the most part. Now, why would the powers that be, why would the news media keep this undercover and not make this a headline story, a front page story, so to speak? Well, because the loss of confidence from the U.S. consumer would have people pull back on their spending. Not everybody. There's certain people that'll spend no matter what, spend their way right into bankruptcy, as we've documented here, many times. When you have bankruptcy there, you can just charge off the debt and start over again. That's a lot of what the U.S. consumers do. But a lot of people that don't want to go down the path of bankruptcy, they don't want their credit score to get dinged. They don't want any late payments. They watch what they spend. And there's still people out there that do that. So that's why I think they don't want this news to get out there, because this could really dampen the U.S. consumers' confidence. But if you look at the results from a lot of the surveys that have been taken, consumers are already down on the economy because they look at their own personal budgets and they see what's happening with their own household expenses, and they can add one and one together and see what's really going on there. It's not, it's not rocket science, but something like this could really actually add to I think, the concern that many people are having now as far as how they're spending money. Now, yes, you'll likely see record holiday travel once again. I think traveling and going places, visiting relatives is the one thing people will cling to, especially if you haven't seen your family members in a while. You're going to travel home for Thanksgiving, for Christmas. I think no matter how broke people are, that's the one thing you'll still see strong spending on, is traveling, especially around the holidays. So, of course, we're going to keep you updated on that. The numbers will be out, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was a record-breaking number. But don't look at that as a sign of a strong consumer, because you have to look at how much debt people took on to enable themselves to travel. So that's the thing that we look at. And when we look at the delinquency rate on the credit cards, it's getting worse. Actually, we were at a 1.5% rate at the end of 2021. And now we're basically doubled that in less than a year and a half, less than 2 years, actually, doubled that. Now, at the peak of the financial crisis, we were at just under 7% delinquency rate on credit cards. So as you can see, we're almost halfway to the peak that we saw during the financial crisis. I'm looking at a chart here. That was actually the second quarter of 2009. So people think that nothing's happening and that there's no sign of any distress in the economy. You've got to just look at the data, and don't just sit there and watch CNBC all day, because they want you buying stocks. They want you all bullish on the markets for obvious reasons. That's their job, is to get you into the markets and portray this economy as a great economy. All right, let's get into some other news here, though. But these delinquency rates are definitely throwing up some red flags here. All right, now let's shift gears up to a recent piece of news here. This is what was initially being reported as, or what looked like, a terrorist attack up by the Niagara Falls Bridge here in the United States. It actually wasn't that. Here's how it's being reported. The driver of a Bentley caused the Niagara Falls checkpoint explosion after a canceled Kiss concert. I don't know who still goes to see Kiss. Well, a lot of people still go to see him. I've been listening to them some of their live clips lately, it seems really slow and kind of low energy. Anyway, that's another topic for another channel. But what started out as being reported by a possible terrorist event was actually a 56-year-old man who lived in a wealthy area, went to a casino after Kiss canceled its farewell tours in Ottawa and Toronto, and then drove his $300,000 vehicle, that's after taxes, Bentley, I can't even say it here, let me try to figure out how to say this, Excelsior X, into a border checkpoint, killing himself and his wife. Wow, there's got to be more to the story than that. A Kiss concert being canceled made him do that. I'm thinking there's got to be more to the story, but that's how it's being reported here. CNN is out reporting that the driver of the vehicle was a man who lived in an upscale area, had intended to go to a Kiss concert. They just say it's looking like a terrible accident. So it was being reported as something bigger initially. So this is not what I've been predicting. I've been predicting, certain things to go down here on U.S. soil, and I think it's only a matter of time. But this definitely, was not it. News out of the Fed. Let's go ahead and talk about this. U.S. Fed officials agreed at their last meeting they would proceed carefully. That's the word they use, carefully. And they would only raise rates if progress in controlling inflation falters. Progress in controlling inflation falters. So what does that mean? What do they mean by controlling inflation? It looks to me like they're not really controlling it right now. Inflation's not as bad as it was, but the cost of living really hasn't come down much for most people when you look at the big picture. Yes, there's a couple items. Gas prices are down a little bit along with oil. A lot of people are saying that that's because of a slowdown in demand, but they're expecting record holiday travel. So how can you have a slowdown in demand when we have another record travel holiday season ahead of us? And maybe it won't be a record holiday season, but it seems like every year they're reporting that it's record travel. Unless we're being told incorrect information, maybe they're just saying it's record travel to not bring up any red flags for people to say, hey, look, people are not traveling. That could be the case. You can't really trust or read everything that you see or hear. Even the news that I'm reporting, I encourage everyone to go and do their own research, do your own due diligence. I was just on the freeway earlier, and of course, it's the holiday season. Today's the day before Thanksgiving. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving, right? Yeah, today's the 22nd. Tomorrow's the 23rd of November. And the traffic coming into San Diego on the 15 freeway was a pretty big mess. But that could just be rush hour. I mean, a lot of people still have to work today. It's kind of hard to tell just by a visual, just by driving down the freeway. But I'm sure they'll tell us again it's record holiday traveling. Quote, all participants agreed that the committee was in a position to proceed carefully, unquote. That's another phrase we need to think about here. So the Fed's going to proceed carefully. So in other words, they're afraid to raise interest rates. It sounds like, and if everything was good, why are they afraid to raise interest rates? This is nothing near an all-time high in interest rates that we're at now. A Fed funds rate of between 5 and 5.25 is nothing. You look back at the 80s, we were about over triple of that. We were at 18% interest rates. So if they really wanted to control inflation, if they wanted to bring the cost of living down, they could raise rates much more. But there's so much debt out there right now that it's obvious they're afraid to raise rates. Who wants to raise rates and get the blame for the collapse that'll ensue when debt is at an all-time high? Of course, they don't want to do that. The time to have higher interest rates is when debt is low. That way you don't have these bubbles formed to begin with. You wouldn't see this housing bubble right now. You wouldn't see this automobile price bubble right now. And that has more to do with lending. But that also had to do with low interest rates too. So if they didn't want to have inflated prices, then they should have never did this in the first place. We should have never had rock bottom interest rates for as long as we did, over 10 years. And that would have been the solution right there. But think of all the good news stories that created. The ultra low interest rates created the illusion of a good economy. Look at all this money people are spending, which is usually borrowed money for the most part. Look at these asset prices, the stock market going up, home prices going up, car prices going up. The consumer must be strong and resilient, right? And people hear that, and I think most people say, wow, this is great. Everybody's doing wonderfully. The leaders are doing such a wonderful job, and that's how they want you to perceive the economy. So they're going to portray asset bubble creation as a strong, growing economy. Remember, economic growth is you and me going into debt, taking out loans, swiping credit cards. That's economic growth. Unfortunately, the game has a ending because we, as people, as consumers, we can't go into infinite debt like the government can. The government seems like it can go into infinite debt. So far, that's what it looks like. I think there's an end point for government infinite debt too. If you look around the globe, you'll see a lot of countries right now turning their back on the dollar. They realize it's a scam. They realize that we're creating endless amounts of money out of thin air and using this, digital money to buy up goods and products from around the world that people actually have to work and sweat and labor to create. We're just importing all of this stuff that we just click a mouse and create this money and send over there. So it's pretty interesting that the game's finally coming to a conclusion, and it can't be much longer. The consumer's close to being tapped out. Back to what we talked about at the beginning of this video, a 3% delinquency rate may not seem like a lot until you look again at that peak in 2007 was just under 7%. We're just about halfway there, just at about 3% where we're at right now. So we'll have to keep an eye on it. The holiday season could put a lot more people into debt. And who knows, by the second quarter of next year, we might see this spike up close or surpass where we were at the peak of the financial crisis. And it's going to be really interesting if that happens, how they're going to try to paint over this and still act like that there's not big problems going on in the economy, right? We see a lot of other things already surpassing financial crisis numbers. Like just look at the debt, for example. The auto loan delinquencies are already past where we were in the financial crisis, the GFC, great financial crisis. So I'm not sure how much longer they're going to be able to hide this before it's just way too obvious, and they'll finally have to admit that we're in a severe economic downturn. All right, everybody, so we're going to wrap this one up. Thanks for being here. Keep stacking. Please make sure you like, subscribe, give this video some traction, and keep us alive here and keep us enable us to keep these reports coming out to you here and stay on top of the latest news for you. We'll talk to everybody very soon. Bye now.